I stood in the living room of my childhood home watching my parents slide a stack of legal papers across the coffee table toward me. My mother's face wore that familiar expression of cold determination I'd seen countless times before, while my father sat back with his arms crossed, jaw set like granite. They'd just announced they were suing me for $300,000 in what they called family contributions money. They claimed I owed them for the privilege of being raised. Every penny I'd earned since turning 18, they said, belonged to the family fund, and they were transferring it all to my older brother Nathan for his latest restaurant venture. Nathan lounged in the corner armchair, that smug smile spreading across his face as he already calculated how he'd spend my life's work. Growing up in our modest 2-story house in Columbus, Ohio, I learned early that love in the Harrison family came with conditions, and I never seemed to meet them. Nathan, 3 years my senior, lived in a different universe than I did, one where every desire materialized into reality through our parents' devotion. When he turned 16, a brand new BMW appeared in our driveway, complete with a giant red bow that cost more than my entire wardrobe. His acceptance to Yale came with zero financial concerns, our parents proudly announcing they'd saved specifically for his education since before he was born. Meanwhile, I took the public bus to my part-time job at the local grocery store, saving every penny for community college application fees. When I asked about help with tuition, my mother Patricia patted my hand condescendingly. "Mabel, sweetie girls don't need fancy degrees. You'll get married soon enough, and then what use would Yale be? We have to be practical with our money." Practical meant funding Nathan's spring break trips to Cancun, while I wore the same winter coat for 4 years until the lining shredded. Practical meant hiring professional tutors when Nathan's grades slipped, while telling me to figure it out myself when I struggled with calculus. Practical meant converting our garage into a music studio for Nathan's brief drummer phase, while refusing to buy me a $50 graphing calculator required for my classes. I worked 3 jobs through community college, falling asleep over textbooks in the campus library, surviving on vending machine dinners and determination. My parents never asked about my grades, never attended my honor society. Induction never noticed when I made the dean's list 4 semesters straight. They were too busy consoling Nathan over his latest academic probation warning. The day I discovered computer programming changed everything. Something about the logic, the clean lines of code, the way complex problems yielded to systematic solutions, spoke to a part of my brain that had been waiting to wake up. I threw myself into learning everything I could, haunting the computer lab, pestering professors with questions, building projects that grew increasingly ambitious. But success in my world remained invisible in theirs. The weekend I won my first hackathon, they threw Nathan a party for managing to pass his remedial economics course. The night I landed my first real programming job, they spent dinner discussing Nathan's brilliant idea to open a nightclub, despite his complete lack of experience or business knowledge. I thought distance might change things when I moved into my own apartment, a cramped studio above a noisy restaurant. Instead, my absence only highlighted their priorities more starkly. They'd call me for tech support or to borrow money, never asking how I was doing, never showing interest in my life beyond what I could provide. Then came the discovery that shattered my last illusions about fair treatment in the Harrison family. While debugging my credit report for a business loan application, I found accounts I'd never opened, debts I'd never incurred, all traced back to when I was 16 years old. My parents had stolen my identity before I even had a chance to build one, taking out credit cards and loans that destroyed my financial future before it began. The betrayal cut deeper than any childhood slight, showing me that their disregard went beyond emotional neglect into calculated exploitation. 7 years after that first programming class, I sat in my actual office, not the garage startup where everything began, but a real building with my company name, Cascade Technologies, etched on glass doors. The journey from that garage to this moment felt surreal, especially considering I'd built it all while fighting the credit destruction my parents had caused. Every bank loan rejection, every investor who backed out after credit checks, every extra job I worked to self-fund my dream, all of it led to this success they couldn't see or wouldn't acknowledge. My 50 employees arrived each morning to a company culture I'd carefully cultivated, one based on respect and recognition, everything missing from my childhood home. We just landed a contract with the state government worth $12 million over 3 years, and the local business journal featured me on their cover as Entrepreneur of the Year. I'd framed that magazine cover not out of vanity, but as proof that I'd become someone worth noticing, even if my own family never would. The morning of the awards ceremony, I called my parents with one last attempt at connection. The Chamber of Commerce is honoring Cascade Technologies tonight. I've reserved seats for you at my table. It would mean everything if you came. My mother's sigh crackled through the phone. Oh, Mabel, you know Thursday nights are when we have dinner with Nathan. He's going through such a difficult time with his latest restaurant closing. Family comes first. Family. The word tasted bitter as I hung up. My assistant Grace knocked and entered carrying a coffee and wearing a concerned expression that had become too familiar lately. Let me guess, she said softly. They're not coming again. I managed a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Nathan needs them more. He always has, always will. Grace set down the coffee with unusual force. You know what their loss? The whole business community will be there celebrating your achievements while they're eating reheated casserole and listening to Nathan complain about his self-inflicted problems. She was right, of course, but knowledge didn't ease the ache of standing at that podium, accepting applause from hundreds of strangers, while the 2 empty seats at my table screamed louder than any standing ovation. In my acceptance speech, I thanked my team, my mentors, my clients, everyone who'd believed in me. I couldn't thank my parents for their support because they'd never given any. The next morning changed everything with a phone call that made my blood run cold. Grace's voice shook as she explained what she'd overheard at the bank while depositing company checks. Mabel, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but your parents were at the next window. They had documents, signatures, trying to add themselves as authorized users on the Cascade Technologies accounts. The bank manager refused, said they'd need your permission, and your father started yelling about parental rights and family obligations. My hands trembled as I processed this information. They weren't content with destroying my personal credit. Now they were attempting to hijack my business directly. The forged documents Grace described sounded sophisticated enough to fool someone who didn't look too closely, and in smaller banks or credit unions, they might have succeeded. I immediately called my lawyer, implemented additional security protocols on all company accounts, and notified every financial institution we worked with about potential fraud attempts. The protective measures felt like armor against an enemy I'd never imagined I'd need to defend against my own parents. That evening, I sat in my empty office staring at the family photo I'd kept on my desk out of some misguided hope. In it, Nathan stood between our parents, their arms around him, while I hovered at the edge, barely in frame. Even our photos told the story of where I ranked. I removed it from the frame, slid it into the shredder, and watched our false family narrative turn into confetti. 3 weeks after discovering my parents' attempted bank fraud, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Nathan's name on the screen made my stomach clench with familiar dread. His voice came through thick with tears and alcohol, a combination I'd heard too many times before. Mabel, I can't do this anymore. The debts, the failures, everyone hates me. I'm standing on the Madison Street Bridge. This is goodbye. My feet hit the floor before my brain fully processed his words. Whatever our history, I couldn't ignore a suicide threat. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove through empty streets while trying to keep him talking. Nathan, please just wait for me. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together. Where exactly are you? His crying intensified. You were always the strong one. Mom and Dad were wrong about everything. I just wanted to tell you that before. The line went dead. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my heart hammering against my ribs. 20 minutes later, I screeched into my parents' driveway, having found no trace of Nathan at the bridge. Their house blazed with lights despite the early hour, and my instincts screamed warnings I ignored in my panic. I burst through the front door to find no crisis, no tears, no desperate scene. Instead, my parents sat calmly at the dining room table with Nathan perfectly composed and a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. Papers spread across the table like a trap waiting to spring. "What's going on, Nathan? You said you were—" My voice died as I saw his satisfied smirk, not a trace of the desperation from his call. My father stood his expression stern. "Sit down, Mabel. We have important family business to discuss." The suited man extended his hand. "Harold Stern, attorney at law. I represent your parents in the matter of recovering family contributions and enforcing contractual obligations." The room spun as I remained standing, refusing to sit at their table like a condemned prisoner. "Family contributions? What are you talking about?" My mother pulled out a document with theatrical flair. "This contract you signed on your 18th birthday, agreeing that all earnings would be considered family property to be distributed according to family need. Nathan's restaurant ventures require capital, and as family, you're obligated to provide it." Obligated. I snatched the paper, scanning the ridiculous terms, and the signature at the bottom that looked exactly like mine but couldn't be. I'd never seen this document in my life yet. The handwriting was perfect down to the way I curved my lowercase letters and crossed my T's. "This is forged. I never signed anything like this." Nathan leaned back, his earlier performance forgotten. "You were probably too busy with your little computer games to remember important family commitments. But we all remember that night, don't we, Mom?" My mother nodded solemnly. "Your birthday dinner at Antonio's restaurant. You were so grateful for everything we'd done for you, so eager to promise you'd always take care of family. It was touching, really." The lie fell from her lips with practiced ease. My 18th birthday had passed unacknowledged, spent alone in my dorm room eating microwave ramen, while they celebrated Nathan's acceptance to his third college after flunking out of 2. No dinner, no acknowledgement, and certainly no contracts. Harold Stern cleared his throat. "The document is legally binding. Your parents are prepared to file suit for $300,000 in owed family contributions, plus interest and emotional damages for your abandonment of family obligations." "Emotional damages? Are you serious?" My voice rose with incredulous anger. "They stole my identity, ruined my credit, tried to break into my business accounts, and now this fabricated contract. This is extortion." My father's face darkened. "Watch your tone, young lady. Everything we did was for this family. You owe us everything you have. Without us, you'd be nothing." The irony might have been funny if it weren't so painful. Without them, I'd have started my business with good credit and no sabotage. Without them, I'd have emotional support instead of constant criticism. Without them, I'd have been everything sooner. "I'm leaving. Expect to hear from my actual lawyer about this fraudulent claim." I turned toward the door, but Nathan's next words stopped me cold. "Go ahead and run away like you always do, but Mom saved all your old school notebooks from elementary through high school. Amazing how consistent handwriting can be over the years, especially when someone takes the time to practice copying it perfectly. Took me 3 months to master your signature, but I'd say it was worth it." The admission hung in the air like a confession and a threat combined. They weren't even trying to hide their crime, so confident in their manipulation, they'd reveal the method to my face. Looking at my brother's satisfied expression, our mother's cold calculation, and our father's righteous anger, I finally understood the truth. They weren't a family who'd lost their way. They were conspirators who'd marked me as their target from the beginning. The morning after the ambush at my parents' house, I sat in my lawyer Jennifer Blake's office watching her examine the forged contract with professional disgust. Her expression grew more incredulous with each detail I revealed about my family's escalating attempts to steal from me. "This is one of the more sophisticated forgeries I've seen," she admitted, "but it's still fraudulent. We'll need handwriting experts, though your brother's confession helps if we can prove it. What concerns me more is their boldness. People don't usually jump straight to this level of crime without practice. Her words sparked a memory that had been nagging at me since the confrontation. My grandmother, Dorothy, passed away 5 years ago. She lived in Westerville, and I spent every summer with her as a kid. When she died, my parents told me she left nothing but medical debts. They handled all the estate matters. Jennifer's pen stopped moving. Did you ever see any documentation about the estate? No, they said it would just upset me. I was in the middle of launching my company and I trailed off as the implications hit me. Oh my God, I never questioned it. Grandma Dorothy always talked about leaving me something said she was saving for my future. We need to investigate this immediately. Jennifer pulled up public records on her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Dorothy Harrison, Westerville, Ohio. Here we go. Property records show a house at 423 Maple Avenue transferred 5 years ago to Patricia and Robert Harrison. My heart dropped. They said it was sold to pay her debts. The house is still in their names, no sale recorded. Jennifer continued searching. And here's something interesting. There was a will filed with the probate court. You're named as the sole beneficiary of the house and, quote, all associated assets and investments. The room tilted as I gripped the desk. They stole my inheritance. It appears so. We need to visit that house immediately, and I'm calling in a forensic accountant. If they lied about the house, they lied about everything else. 2 hours later, we stood outside Grandma Dorothy's house, my childhood refuge now locked behind a gate I didn't remember. The garden she'd tended with such love had grown wild, and newspapers yellowed on the porch. Jennifer had obtained an emergency court order for access, and a locksmith worked on the front door, while my memories flooded back. I spent every summer here. I told Jennifer, my voice thick with emotion. She taught me to bake in that kitchen, helped me with homework at the dining room table. She was the only one who ever really saw me. The lock clicked open and we stepped into a time capsule. Everything remained exactly as Dorothy had left it, covered in dust and neglect, but untouched. My parents had stolen it, but couldn't bear to live in it or sell it, leaving it to rot like their consciences. Thomas Chen, the building inspector Jennifer had called, emerged from the basement, shaking his head. You need to see this. There's a hidden room behind a false wall. We followed him down the familiar wooden stairs into a section of basement I'd never known existed. Behind what looked like solid paneling was a small room containing a desk filing cabinets and an old safe built into the wall. Your grandmother was a careful woman, Thomas said, admiration clear in his voice. This construction is from the 1950s, but expertly done. Whatever she hid here, she meant to protect. The safe combination proved simple to crack once I remembered Dorothy's patterns. She'd used my birthday, the one date she never forgot, even when my parents did. Inside, we found treasure beyond my imagination. Savings bonds worth $800,000, all in my name, dated over 20 years of careful investment. Gold coins in protective cases, and documents, so many documents. Jennifer whistled softly as she calculated the bond's matured value. With interest and the gold prices today, we're looking at well over $1 million, plus the house itself worth at least $400,000 in this neighborhood. But the documents proved even more valuable than the money. Dorothy had kept meticulous records of every birthday card returned, unopened, every gift my parents rejected on my behalf, every attempt she'd made to provide for me that they'd blocked. A letter dated just before her death made everything clear. My dearest Mabel. I read aloud, my voice breaking. If you're reading this, then they've finally shown their true colors. I've watched your parents favor Nathan while neglecting you since you were born. I've documented everything in case you ever need proof of their cruelty. The money is yours alone, protected by trusts they can't touch. The house is yours to make the home you never had with them. Never doubt that you were loved completely and unconditionally. You were the granddaughter of my heart, and watching you grow strong despite their neglect was my greatest joy. Through my tears, I saw Jennifer photographing everything while Thomas continued his inspection. He emerged from behind another filing cabinet with a grim expression. "There's more. Looks like your parents have been stealing from other family members, too. There are bank statements here for accounts belonging to various Harrisons, all showing suspicious withdrawals after their deaths." The scope of my parents' crimes expanded with each discovered document. They hadn't just stolen from me, but from Dorothy's siblings, distant cousins, anyone whose estates they could access. My inheritance was just the latest in a long pattern of family theft. "We need to contact the FBI," Jennifer said quietly. "This is interstate fraud, elder abuse, and organized crime crossing multiple jurisdictions. Your lawsuit just became the least of their problems." I stood in Dorothy's kitchen, running my fingers across the counter where she'd taught me to roll pie crust, and felt her presence like a warm embrace. She'd known this day would come, planned for it, protected me even in death. Her real gift wasn't the money, but the evidence, the proof that I wasn't crazy or ungrateful, but the victim of systematic abuse and theft. The lockbox in the kitchen pantry, hidden behind canned goods that had expired years ago, contained one final surprise. More bonds, these in Nathan's name, worth exactly the same as mine. Dorothy had loved us both, equally provided for us both, but somehow only my inheritance had been stolen. The implications sent chills down my spine. "Jennifer," I called, holding up Nathan's untouched bonds. "I think my parents' betrayal goes deeper than we imagined. They didn't just steal from me. They've been lying to Nathan, too." The forensic accountant Jennifer hired, Diana Waterford, laid out her findings across my conference room table with the precision of a surgeon revealing cancer. Each document painted another stroke in a picture of financial crime that went beyond family theft into corporate fraud. "Your brother's restaurant chain, Sunset Grill, shows massive irregularities." Diana explained, adjusting her glasses as she pointed to flow charts that looked like spider webs of deception. "Money comes in from investors, but instead of going to restaurant operations, it's funneled through shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming." I studied the papers, my business experience making the scheme painfully clear. He's running a money laundering operation. More than that. Diana pulled out another set of documents. These investment contracts show Cascade Technologies as a major stakeholder, contributing $200,000 over the past year. But you never authorized these investments, correct? My hands shook as I examined contracts bearing my forged signature and my company's seal. "We've never invested a penny in Nathan's businesses. How did they even get our corporate documents?" Grace, who'd been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "Remember when we had that break-in 6 months ago? Nothing seemed missing, but they'd gone through the filing cabinets. We thought it was industrial espionage from competitors." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. My parents hadn't just stolen my personal inheritance. They'd been systematically infiltrating my business, preparing for larger-scale fraud. The investment documents showed dates aligning with Nathan's most desperate financial periods, suggesting they'd been propping up his failures with my phantom money. Thomas Chen, who'd become an unexpected ally after discovering the house's secrets, arrived with more disturbing news. He'd been investigating other properties owned by my parents and found a storage unit registered under a false business name. I convinced the facility manager to let me peek inside, claiming code violations. He said, producing photos on his phone. "You need to see what they're stockpiling." The images showed boxes of Cascade Technologies, letterhead copies of my business cards, corporate stamps, and even employee ID badges with my executives' names but different photos. They'd created an entire shadow version of my company ready to deploy for fraud at massive scales. "This explains the weird calls we've been getting," Grace interjected. "Vendors asking about orders we never placed, clients questioning contract changes we never made. I thought it was competitor harassment, but they've been impersonating my company." The violation felt more personal than any childhood neglect. They're not just trying to steal from me anymore. They're trying to become me. Diana spread out more financial records, these showing federal investigation markers. Here's where it gets worse. The FBI is already investigating Sunset Grill for fraud. Your parents knew this and were positioning Cascade Technologies to take the fall. Every suspicious transaction traces back to your company on paper, while the actual money disappeared into accounts controlled by your parents. The conference room fell silent as we absorbed the implications. My parents hadn't just betrayed me. They'd constructed an elaborate frame-up that could destroy everything I'd built and land me in federal prison. The forged childhood contract was just a distraction, a small-scale shakedown to keep me focused on family drama while they executed the real crime. Jennifer had been furiously taking notes throughout the presentation. We need to go to the FBI immediately with this evidence. Every day we wait gives them more time to establish this false narrative. But Diana held up one more document, her expression grave. There's a final complication. This came up in my deep dive into Nathan's finances. He's been taking money from some very dangerous people, promising returns based on Cascade Technologies' success. If those investments go bad, she didn't need to finish. My family hadn't just put my business and freedom at risk. They'd potentially put my life in danger by promising criminals access to my success. The scared little girl in me wanted to run to dissolve the company and disappear. But the woman I'd become, forged in spite of their neglect, refused to let them win. Schedule a meeting with the FBI tomorrow, I told Jennifer. We're going to give them everything, and Diana, I need you to create a complete audit trail showing the real money flow versus the fabricated one. Every forged document, every fake transaction, every lie they've told. As my team prepared for war, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The image that loaded made my blood freeze me entering my apartment last night, photographed from across the street. The message below read, "Your family owes us $2 million. Pay or the debt transfers to you." Grace saw my face pale and looked at the phone. "We're calling the police, now." "No," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "We document everything and add it to the FBI file. They want to escalate. Let them explain their threats to federal agents." That night, I worked late and my office security guards now posted at every entrance. The girl who'd once begged for scraps of parental approval had vanished, replaced by a woman who understood that sometimes family was the enemy you never saw coming. As I compiled evidence of their crimes, I thought about Nathan still believing he was the golden child, while our parents positioned him as another fall guy for their schemes. The real tragedy wasn't my stolen inheritance or forged signatures. It was that my parents had raised two children as weapons against each other, tools for their greed, never seeing us as people worthy of genuine love. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of stopping them. Tonight, I mourned the family we'd never been. The federal courthouse in downtown Columbus buzzed with an energy that made my skin prickle as I walked through security on the first day of the civil trial. My parents had pushed forward with their fabricated contract claim, apparently believing their offensive position would protect them from the criminal investigations now circling like sharks. Jennifer walked beside me, her confidence radiating like armor I desperately needed. "Remember," she murmured as we approached the courtroom doors, "they think you're still the scared little girl they could manipulate. Show them who you've become." Inside, my parents sat with Harold Stern at the plaintiff's table, their expressions combining false righteousness with barely concealed greed. My mother wore the same pearl necklace she'd worn to every important event of Nathan's life, never once to mine. My father's suit was new, probably purchased with my stolen inheritance. Nathan sat in the gallery behind them, his recent weight loss and hollow eyes suggesting the pressure of federal investigation was taking its toll. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, her reputation for seeing through deception both encouraging and terrifying. As opening statements began, Harold Stern painted me as an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned family values, accumulating wealth, while her struggling parents and brother suffered. His theatrical presentation might have been compelling, if not for the evidence boxes stacked beside our defense table, each one labeled with a different aspect of their crimes. Jennifer's opening was surgical in its precision. Your Honor will show that not only is this contract a complete fabrication, but it represents the latest in a pattern of fraud, theft, and conspiracy that spans decades. The plaintiff's claims of family obligation are particularly audacious, given they've systematically stolen from their daughter since she was 16 years old. The first witness called was my mother, who took the stand with practiced dignity. Under Harold's gentle questioning, she wove a tale of sacrifice and disappointment of a daughter who'd forgotten where she came from. Her performance was flawless until Jennifer began cross-examination. Mrs. Harrison, you claim Mabel signed this contract at a birthday dinner at Antonio's restaurant. Can you produce a receipt from that evening? My mother's composure flickered. It was over 14 years ago. Who keeps receipts that long? Antonio's does, actually. We subpoenaed their records. Would it surprise you to learn they show no reservation or payment under your name for that entire month? Perhaps we used cash. And perhaps you'd like to explain why Mabel's college dormitory records show her checking in for a study session that same evening 50 miles away. The holes in their story widened with each question. My mother's answers became increasingly flustered, her polished facade cracking as Jennifer presented evidence of the forged signatures, the stolen identity, the systematic exclusion of me from family finances while draining my credit. But the real bombshell came when Jennifer called a surprise witness. The defense calls Paula Martinez. A woman I'd never seen before walked in her professional appearance and nervous energy, immediately commanding attention. My father's face went white as she took the oath, and my mother grabbed his arm hard enough to wrinkle his new suit. Ms. Martinez, Jennifer began, can you explain your relationship to Robert Harrison? Paula's voice was steady despite her obvious discomfort. We've been in a relationship for 20 years. Robert has been supporting me and our 2 children. The courtroom erupted. I sat frozen as Paula detailed a complete second family my father had maintained throughout my entire life. 2 children, Madison and Ryan, both put through Harvard with full financial support. A house in the suburbs, vacations to Europe. Everything denied to me had been freely given to strangers who shared my father's blood. He told me his first family was dead. Paula continued, tears now flowing. It wasn't until I saw the Business Journal article about Mabel that I realized he'd been lying. When I confronted him, he said his legitimate children were disappointments who didn't deserve his resources, but our children were different, special. My mother had released my father's arm and sat rigidly, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. This revelation clearly blindsided her as much as it did me. The family financial deprivation suddenly made sense. My father had been funding an entire second life while claiming poverty to his first family. Jennifer produced financial records showing the money trail. Mr. Harrison, these bank statements show you've transferred over $2 million to accounts controlled by Ms. Martinez over the past 2 decades. Money you claimed your family didn't have for Mabel's education. Can you explain this? Harold Stern objected desperately, but Judge Morrison overruled him, her interest clearly piqued. My father took the stand with the demeanor of a man walking to his execution. It's not what it looks like. He stammered, the powerful patriarch persona crumbling. Then please explain what it is, Jennifer pressed, because it looks like you deprived one daughter of basic support while lavishing another with every advantage. It looks like you stole from your mother-in-law's estate, meant for Mabel, and used it to fund your secret family. It looks like systematic fraud motivated by favoritism, so extreme it borders on pathological. My father's explanations tangled into contradictions. He claimed Paula misunderstood their relationship, then admitted to the children. He insisted the money was from personal savings, then couldn't explain how someone claiming financial hardship had such savings. Every lie spawned 2 more, creating a web that trapped him tighter with each word. Nathan watched from the gallery with an expression I'd never seen before recognition. The golden child was realizing he'd been played too, just in a different game. Our parents hadn't loved him more. They'd simply found him easier to control, a better weapon against me. The favoritism that had defined our lives was just another manipulation tactic in their arsenal of greed. As the first day of trial ended, my family's dirty secrets lay exposed like wounds in need of air. But this was just the beginning. Jennifer had orchestrated the revelations perfectly, each one building toward the criminal evidence that would demolish their case entirely. Walking out of the courthouse, I passed Paula Martinez in the hallway. She stopped, her eyes meeting mine with shared recognition of betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "If I'd known you existed, I would have never—" "You're as much a victim as I am," I replied, surprising myself with the lack of anger. He stole from both of us, just in different ways. The second day of trial opened with Grace taking the witness stand, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by steel determination. She'd been more than my assistant. She'd become my witness to years of suspicious activity I'd been too close to see clearly. After the attempted bank fraud incident, Grace testified, "I took it upon myself to install security cameras in Ms. Harrison's office. She'd mentioned things being moved papers out of place. I thought we had a corporate spy problem." Jennifer clicked a remote, and the courtroom screens lit up with grainy but clear footage. "Can you describe what we're seeing here?" "This is from 3 months ago, 2:47 a.m. That's Patricia Harrison entering through the back door using a key we never gave her." I watched my mother move through my office with practiced familiarity, photographing contracts, client lists, and financial documents with her phone. She worked methodically, returning everything exactly as she'd found it. The violation felt fresh, even watching it months later. "And this next footage?" Jennifer prompted. 2 weeks later, Robert Harrison and Nathan Harrison entering together. They spent 3 hours copying files onto USB drives and practicing signatures at Ms. Harrison's desk. The image of my father coaching Nathan on replicating my signature was damning. They'd brought practice papers comparing each attempt against originals stolen from my files. My father's patience in crime exceeded any he'd shown in parenting, spending 20 minutes perfecting the way I curved my capital M. But Jennifer saved the audio recordings for maximum impact. "Ms. Chen, you mentioned the security system included audio. What did you discover when reviewing these recordings?" Grace pulled out transcripts. "Multiple conversations between the Harrisons planning various schemes. May I play excerpt 17? Judge Morrison nodded, and my father's voice filled the courtroom. "The lawsuit's just phase 1. Even if we lose, it'll distract her while we execute the real plan. Nathan's already got those investors lined up, thinking they're buying into Cascade Technologies. By the time Mabel figures out what's happening, we'll have transferred enough assets to disappear." My mother's response chilled the room. "And if she fights back too hard—" Dr. Kellerman's ready to declare her mentally unstable. Amazing what a psychiatrist will diagnose for $50,000. Power of attorney transfers to family, and will have control of everything. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Jennifer paused the recording for effect before continuing. "This Dr. Kellerman, did you investigate him?" Grace nodded grimly. "He lost his license in California for false diagnoses and custody battles. He's been practicing here, illegally specializing in commitment papers for hire. We've turned evidence over to the medical board and district attorney." The recordings continued, each more damaging than the last. My parents discussed destroying evidence, bribing witnesses, and even arranging accidents that would look like stress-induced breakdowns. The child who'd once desperately sought their approval listened to them plan her destruction with the casual tone of grocery shopping. Harold Stern's objections grew increasingly desperate, but Judge Morrison overruled each one. The evidence was legally obtained from my own property, capturing criminal conspiracy in real time. When Stern argued the recordings were prejudicial, the judge's response was sharp. "Prejudicial, Mr. Stern. These recordings document your clients planning multiple felonies. If they're prejudiced by their own words, perhaps they shouldn't have spoken them while committing breaking and entering." Nathan took the stand next, clearly reluctant but compelled by subpoena. His usual arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization of how deeply he'd been manipulated. They told me Mabel owed us, he began, his voice uncertain. Said she'd stolen opportunities meant for me, that the family money was rightfully mine, but got diverted to her. And you believe this despite seeing her work multiple jobs through school? Jennifer asked gently. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting I'd failed on my own. They made everything my failures seem like her fault somehow. The cross-examination revealed years of lies our parents had told each of us about the other. They'd shown Nathan fake bank statements suggesting I'd inherited millions while he got nothing. They'd told him I'd bribed teachers for grades, stolen his college acceptance letters, sabotaged his businesses through anonymous complaints. Every failure in his life had been blamed on my invisible hand, creating a hatred based entirely on fiction. When did you start to suspect they were lying? Jennifer asked. When I saw Grandma Dorothy's real will. She left us exactly the same amount, but they told me she'd cut me out completely because Mabel had poisoned her against me. Finding those bonds in my name untouched, I realized they'd stolen from me too, just differently. They stole my inheritance, but they also stole my ability to succeed by letting me believe I was entitled to everything without effort. His testimony created a strange moment of connection between us two siblings, realizing we'd been weapons aimed at each other by parents who saw us only as resources to exploit. The golden child and the scapegoat were just different forms of abuse, designed to keep us too busy hating each other to notice the real enemy. Grace returned to the stand to play one final recording dated just 3 days before the lawsuit was filed. My parents' voices were clear as they made their final preparations. After tomorrow, either we own her company or she's in a psychiatric ward. Win-win. What about Nathan? He's becoming unstable with the FBI investigation. Let him take the fall for the restaurant fraud. We'll play the devastated parents, maybe even sue Mabel for driving him to crime with her neglect. There's always another angle. The casual disposal of their son in their plans shocked even the judge. Nathan's face crumpled in the gallery as he heard himself written off as acceptable collateral damage. The favorite child, discovering he was just as disposable as the neglected one, created a tragedy within the larger betrayal. As the recordings ended, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. My parents' attorney slumped in his chair, clearly reconsidering his life choices. My mother stared at my father with pure hatred, the secret family revelation mixing with evidence of crimes she hadn't known about. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his lifetime of deception collapsing in real time. Judge Morrison called a recess, but not before making an unusual statement. I've presided over many family disputes, but rarely have I seen such calculated cruelty between parents and children. The evidence presented today goes far beyond civil matters. I'm forwarding all recordings to the criminal division immediately. Walking out for lunch break, I found Nathan waiting in the hallway. For the first time in our lives, he looked at me without sneering or demanding. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for everything. I was their weapon against you, and I was too stupid and selfish to see it." The apology I'd waited decades to hear felt hollow now, but I recognized the courage it took to offer it. We were both their victims, just in different ways. What matters is what we do now. Sarah Williams approached the witness stand with the confidence of someone who'd spent 15 years as a social worker, but the pain of remembering a childhood friend's suffering. We'd lost touch after high school, when I'd thrown myself into building my future while she'd pursued social work, inspired, she'd told me once, by what she'd witnessed in my home. "Ms. Williams," Jennifer began, "you were Mabel Harrison's closest friend throughout elementary and high school. Can you describe what you observed in the Harrison household?" Sarah's professional composure steadied her voice. "I first noticed something was wrong in 3rd grade. Mabel came to school with bruises she said were from falling off her bike, but she didn't have a bike. Nathan had 2, but Mabel wasn't allowed to touch them. My parents shifted uncomfortably at the plaintiff's table. They'd always been careful to keep their neglect hidden from mandatory reporters, but they'd underestimated the observational skills of another child. "I started documenting things in my diary," Sarah continued. "My mom thought I was too young to understand abuse, but I knew Mabel was hurting. I wrote down every bruise, every day she came to school hungry, every time she wore the same clothes for a week because her parents forgot to do her laundry." Jennifer produced a series of worn notebooks. "These are your childhood diaries which you've maintained all these years." "Yes, and when I became a social worker, I realized I'd inadvertently created contemporaneous documentation of neglect that spanned a decade." The entries Sarah read painted a devastating picture. October 15th. "Mabel's lunch account is empty again. She said her parents forgot to add money. I shared my sandwich." December 3rd. "Mabel can't come to my birthday party because Nathan has a soccer game and her parents say family comes first. But she's family too." February 22nd. "Mabel's arm is in a sling. She said she fell down the stairs, but Nathan pushed her. I saw it happen at school, but she begged me not to tell." My mother's attorney tried to object, claiming hearsay, but Judge Morrison overruled. "These are contemporaneous records made by a child witness, now authenticated by an adult professional. I'll allow them." Sarah's testimony grew more damaging as she aged through the diaries. By middle school, she was photographing my injuries with a disposable camera, instinctively building a case she didn't know I'd need decades later. This photo from 7th grade shows Mabel's back. Sarah displayed an image that made several jury members gasp. Those aren't random bruises. They're belt marks. Nathan had gotten a C on a test, and their parents blamed Mabel for not helping him study. This was her punishment for his grade. The systematic nature of the abuse became undeniable. Sarah had documented patterns. I was punished for Nathan's failures, denied food when money was tight, despite Nathan's allowance, continuing forced to skip school events to babysit Nathan despite being only 3 years older. The worst incident I documented was in 9th grade. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Mabel was hospitalized for what the papers called exhaustion, but I visited her, and the truth was malnutrition. She'd been living on school lunches only for 3 months because her parents spent their food budget on Nathan's music camp. Jennifer introduced hospital records corresponding to Sarah's diary entries. The medical file revealed what teenage me had been too ashamed to admit: severe vitamin deficiencies, underweight by 20 pounds, symptoms consistent with prolonged nutritional neglect. The hospital social worker investigated, Sarah added, producing another document. But Mabel's parents convinced them it was a misunderstanding, that Mabel had an eating disorder she'd hidden from them. They cried about their difficult daughter, and the investigation was closed. I remembered that hospital stay differently than my parents had spun it. They'd told relatives I was seeking attention, being dramatic. The truth was they'd nearly starved me to death through neglect, while Nathan attended a camp that cost $12,000 for 2 weeks. Harold Stern's cross-examination attempted to paint Sarah as a biased friend, making assumptions, but her professional training showed. She calmly referenced child development markers, medical indicators of abuse, and the consistency of documentation spanning years. Her childhood diaries weren't the emotional ramblings of a concerned friend, but the precise observations of a natural-born advocate. "One more thing," Sarah said as her testimony concluded. "I have audio recordings from high school. My mom bought me a tape recorder for journalism class, and I used it to document Mabel's situation when the bruises became harder to hide." The courtroom heard my teenage voice, exhausted and resigned, explaining why I couldn't join the debate team, despite qualifying, "They need me to work more hours at the store. Nathan wrecked his car again and someone has to pay for the repairs. It's fine. I'm used to it." Sarah's teenage voice responded with anger I'd forgotten. "It's not fine. They bought him 3 cars already. You've been saving for 2 years and still take the bus." "That's different. I'm reliable. Nathan needs things because he's not. That's what family does." Hearing my younger self parrot my parents' twisted logic made my adult stomach turn. I'd internalized their abuse so completely that I'd defended it even to someone trying to help me. The judge appeared particularly affected by this recording, her expression hardening as she made notes. When Sarah stepped down, she paused at my table. "I kept everything because I knew someday you'd need proof that it wasn't your imagination. You weren't crazy, Mabel. You were surviving." The prosecution's attempts to rehabilitate my parents' image after Sarah's testimony fell flat. They called character witnesses who praised their involvement in Nathan's activities, unknowingly reinforcing the favoritism. A soccer coach meant to show their dedication instead revealed they'd attended every one of Nathan's games while missing my National Honor Society induction on the same day. Dr. Amanda Foster, a child development expert, reviewed Sarah's documentation and the medical records. Her conclusion was damning. This represents textbook narcissistic abuse with Mabel as the scapegoat child and Nathan as the golden child. The physical neglect was serious, but the psychological damage of being systematically devalued while watching a sibling receive love and resources is profound. That Mabel achieved any success given this foundation is remarkable. That her parents now attempt to steal that success is unfortunately consistent with this pathology. As court adjourned, I felt raw and exposed. Decades of carefully buried trauma had been excavated for public consumption. But there was also strange relief in external validation that it hadn't been my imagination, that the pain was real and documented. That evening, an unexpected visitor knocked on my hotel room door. Nathan stood in the hallway looking haggard but sober. "I need to tell you something," he began. "I remember that day you went to the hospital. Mom told me you were faking for attention, that we should ignore you. I believed them. But I also remember stealing food from your room the week before because I was hungry too. They weren't feeding either of us properly, but somehow I convinced myself it was normal for you, but not for me." The admission hung between us, heavy with years of program dysfunction. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the enemy, but as another survivor of our parents' psychological warfare, just with different wounds. Marcus Chen had been my business partner for 5 years, the technical genius who'd helped transform Cascade Technologies from a garage startup into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Watching him take the witness stand felt like another layer of betrayal until Jennifer's first question revealed the truth. "Mr. Chen, can you explain why you're appearing as a witness for the defense rather than the plaintiff?" Marcus adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit I recognized from countless late-night coding sessions. "Because 6 weeks ago, Patricia and Robert Harrison approached me with a proposition. They offered me 60% ownership of Cascade Technologies if I would testify that Mabel had stolen proprietary code and embezzled funds." The courtroom stirred with fresh shock. My parents' desperation had led them to attempt corrupting one of the few people I trusted completely. "How did you respond to this offer?" Jennifer asked. "I immediately contacted my attorney and the FBI. We arranged for me to wear a recording device to all subsequent meetings with the Harrisons." The betrayal I'd initially felt transformed into gratitude as Marcus detailed the elaborate sting operation he'd participated in to expose my parents' expanding conspiracy. He produced a small digital recorder from his pocket. "The FBI has the originals, but I was permitted to bring copies for this proceeding." The first recording captured my mother's initial approach, her voice honey-sweet with manipulation. "Marcus, dear, we know how hard you've worked building that company with Mabel, but she's not well. The stress has made her paranoid delusional. She's hidden assets stolen from her own company. We're only trying to protect what you've rightfully earned." Marcus's recorded response was carefully neutral. "That's concerning. What kind of proof do you have?" My father's voice joined in. "We'll provide all the documentation you need. Bank records, emails, whatever it takes. Your testimony will ensure you get what you deserve from that company." "And what exactly would my testimony say?" "Simply the truth, as we'll show it to you. That Mabel has been erratic, making dangerous decisions, hiding money. That you've been carrying the company while she spirals into instability." Each recording revealed more of their plan. They offered Marcus not just majority ownership, but also protection from the FBI investigation into Nathan's restaurant scheme. They promised to destroy evidence linking him to any financial irregularities, unaware he'd never participated in any. "This next recording is particularly revealing," Marcus warned before playing it. My mother's voice, stripped of its false sweetness, spoke with cold calculation. "If Marcus won't cooperate, we have other options. Nathan's been studying his wife, Emily. Pretty thing, isn't she? Young women can be so vulnerable to charming men with money. Are you threatening my family?" Marcus's recorded voice held controlled anger. "Threatening, no, dear. Just observing that Nathan's always had a way with taken women. And if compromising photos were to surface well, who could predict how that might affect your credibility as a witness?" Jennifer paused the playback. "Mr. Chen, what happened next?" I informed Emily immediately. She was furious and agreed to help gather evidence. The next time Nathan approached her at a coffee shop, she was ready. The courtroom screens displayed security footage of Nathan sliding into a booth across from Emily Chen, his practiced smile and expensive suit marking him as a predator in designer clothing. Emily's body language showed discomfort as he leaned too close, touched her hand without permission, and pulled out his phone to show her something that made her recoil. Emily recorded their entire conversation. Marcus continued. Nathan offered her money, jewelry, even a condo if she would participate in creating compromising situations that could be photographed. When she refused, he threatened to destroy my career and make sure I never worked in tech again. Emily's audio recording played next, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Why would you do this to your sister?" Nathan's response chilled the room. "Mabel's had everything easy her whole life. Natural talent, grandma's love, now this company. She owes us for all the advantages she stole. This is just collecting what's fair. But Marcus is innocent in your family drama." "Nobody's innocent. He chose her side. That makes him an enemy. Mom and Dad taught me that you're either family or you're obstacles to remove." The twisted logic of my family's worldview laid bare in Nathan's words. They'd created their own reality where their victims were somehow the aggressors, where their crimes were justified retribution for imagined slights. Marcus's testimony continued with more recordings, each documenting my parents' escalating attempts to corrupt or compromise him. They offered bribes that grew from hundreds of thousands to millions. When he remained unmoved, they tried blackmail with manufactured evidence of code theft that any real programmer would recognize as laughable. "The FBI agent running the operation told me to keep stringing them along," Marcus explained. "Every meeting gave them more evidence of conspiracy, wire fraud, attempted extortion, and racketeering." The final recording was the most damaging. My parents, growing desperate as the trial approached, made one last offer. "Forget the company," my father said. "We'll give you $2 million in cash to simply disappear. Take a vacation during the trial, come back when it's over. Your absence will speak louder than any testimony. $2 million just to not appear. Consider it an investment in your future. Mabel's going down either way. The FBI's closing in on the restaurant fraud, and we've made sure all trails lead to her. You can either get paid to watch from a distance or get dragged down with her." Marcus's response was perfect. "I'll need that in writing, and the first payment up front." The documents my parents provided, thinking they were buying his absence instead, became evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. They'd even detailed their frame-up plan in writing, so confident in their scheme they'd put federal crimes in black and white. "Mr. Chen," Jennifer asked, "why did you risk so much to expose this conspiracy?" Marcus looked directly at me for the first time since taking the stand. "Because Mabel Harrison saved my career 5 years ago when no one else would hire a programmer with a criminal record from a teenage mistake. She believed in second chances in judging people by their potential rather than their past. I couldn't stand by and watch her family destroy someone who'd shown me the kind of loyalty they'll never understand." Harold Stern's cross-examination attempted to paint Marcus as a disgruntled employee seeking attention, but the recordings spoke for themselves. When Stern suggested Marcus had edited the audio, the FBI's digital forensics expert testified that the recordings were authentic and unaltered with metadata, proving their dates and locations. As Marcus left the stand, he stopped at our table. "I'm sorry you had to hear all that, Mabel. No one should have to listen to their family plot their destruction like a business transaction." But I felt oddly liberated. Each revelation stripped away another layer of the false narrative I'd carried for decades. They hadn't neglected me because I was unworthy of love. They'd targeted me because I was strong enough to succeed despite them, and that success threatened their delusions of superiority. The prosecutor announced they were filing additional charges based on the recording's witness, tampering, attempted extortion, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and solicitation of blackmail. My civil case had opened a Pandora's box of criminal activity that would keep my parents in courtrooms for years to come. That night, as I reviewed the day's testimony with my legal team, Jennifer made an observation that shifted my perspective. "Your parents didn't just try to steal your money or your company," she said. "They tried to steal your reality to make you doubt your own experiences and worth. But look at what happened instead. Every person they tried to corrupt became your witness. Every scheme they hatched provided more evidence. They've been defeating themselves all along." Diana Waterford returned to the witness stand with the measured confidence of someone about to detonate carefully placed explosives under a foundation of lies. The forensic accountant had spent weeks following money trails that led through offshore accounts, shell companies, and investment funds that existed only on paper. "Your Honor." Diana began spreading financial documents across the witness stand. My investigation into the Harrison family finances reveals a pattern of wealth acquisition through systematic theft from deceased relatives spanning 3 decades. My parents, who'd portrayed themselves as middle-class victims struggling to support ungrateful children, sat rigid as their true financial picture emerged. Harold Stern had abandoned his theatrical objections, apparently recognizing that no amount of legal maneuvering could overcome documented evidence of millions in stolen assets. Let's begin with the estate of Margaret Harrison, Robert Harrison's aunt, who passed in 1998. Diana continued projecting bank statements onto the courtroom screens. She left an estate valued at $2.3 million to be divided among her 6 nephews and nieces. The Harrisons, as executors, reported the estate value at $300,000 after alleged debts. Jennifer guided Diana through the evidence methodically. What happened to the missing $2 million transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands within days of Margaret's death? The Harrisons created false creditor claims, paid themselves for settling non-existent debts, then moved the money offshore. The other beneficiaries received less than $50,000 each from an estate worth millions. The pattern repeated with sickening consistency. Uncle Theodore's shipping business, valued at $4 million, somehow yielded only $200,000 for his children after my parents handled the estate. Cousin Eleanor's art collection, appraised at $800,000, vanished entirely, reported as worthless reproductions. Each death in the extended Harrison family had enriched my parents while leaving grieving relatives with crumbs. The sophisticated nature of these thefts suggests significant financial knowledge, Diana observed. Mr. Harrison's accounting degree and Mrs. Harrison's paralegal training created a perfect combination for estate fraud. They knew exactly which documents to forge, which assets to hide, and how to manipulate grieving family members. My mind reeled as Diana revealed account after account, property after property, stolen inheritance after stolen inheritance. The parents who'd claimed poverty while denying me basic necessities were sitting on over $15 million in stolen wealth, carefully hidden across multiple international jurisdictions. Now, regarding the specific claims in this case, Diana pulled up a new set of documents. The Harrisons claim their daughter Mabel owes them $300,000 for the cost of raising her. I've analyzed their actual expenditures on both children from birth to age 18. The comparative charts made several jury members gasp. Nathan's expenses totaled over $1 million: private schools, cars, tutors, sports equipment, music lessons, and European vacations. My expenses barely reached $80,000, and that included the legally mandated costs like basic food and shelter. Furthermore, Diana added, I found evidence that Patricia Harrison received child support payments from a previous relationship that were meant for Mabel's care. These payments, totaling $120,000 over 15 years, were deposited into accounts used exclusively for Nathan's expenses. Jennifer introduced bank statements showing the diverted payments, so they actually profited from raising Mabel while claiming she cost them money. Significantly, if we subtract what they spent on her from what they received for her care, the Harrisons made approximately $40,000 profit on raising their daughter while simultaneously neglecting her basic needs. The evidence mounted relentlessly. My parents had inherited from 7 different relatives, stolen from 3 estate settlements they'd administered, and embezzled from 2 family businesses they'd helped manage. Their victims included elderly aunts who'd trusted them cousins, who'd named them executors, believing family would protect their interests, and business partners who'd accepted their accounting without question. There's one more significant discovery, Diana said, pulling up property records. The Harrisons owned 16 rental properties across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, all purchased with stolen estate funds and hidden under shell company names. The annual rental income exceeds $600,000. I thought of the winter I'd gone without a coat because they claimed money was too tight the nights I'd studied by candlelight because they said the electricity bill was too high, all while they collected rent from properties bought with blood money furnished with stolen inheritances. Judge Morrison interjected, Ms. Waterford, are you stating that the plaintiffs in this case, while suing their daughter for support, are actually multimillionaires? Conservative estimate puts their net worth at $18 million, Your Honor, and that's only what I could trace. Their lifestyle appears modest because they've spent 3 decades hiding wealth that wasn't theirs to begin with. The courtroom erupted as reporters scribbled frantically, and family members in the gallery recognized names of their own deceased relatives. My parents had stolen from so many people that half the courtroom had been their victims without knowing it. Harold Stern made one last attempt at damage control. These are merely allegations based on circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial. Diana cut him off, producing a leather journal. This is Robert Harrison's personal ledger recovered from a safety deposit box he thought was secret. He documented every theft, every forged document, every hidden asset. He was so proud of his crimes, he kept a running tally. My father's handwriting filled pages with meticulous records of his thefts. Aunt Margaret, $2.1 million net. Theodore, $3.7 million after expenses. Eleanor, $800,000 plus paintings sold privately. Each entry included notes about how he'd fooled the victims, which family members were too stupid to question documents, who was too grief-stricken to investigate. The most chilling entry was about my grandmother, Dorothy. The old woman left everything to Mabel, but she'll never see a penny. Told Patricia the bonds were worthless, house mortgaged. Mabel too busy with her little computer business to check. 5 years and counting, she still believes we're poor. Nathan remains the perfect distraction. The girl funds her brother's failures with money she doesn't know she has. Jennifer asked Diana to read that entry again, ensuring the judge absorbed every word of my father's contempt for both his children. Nathan in the gallery had gone pale as he realized he'd been as much a mark as I had just played differently. Your Honor. Diana concluded, the $300,000 the Harrisons claim Mabel owes them is particularly offensive, given they've stolen approximately $1.4 million, specifically designated for her from various family estates, including her grandmother's. They're suing her for money while sitting on fortunes they stole from her inheritance. As Diana left the stand, the full scope of my parents' crimes hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They weren't just bad parents or small-time grifters. They were professional thieves who'd turned family trust into a weapon, grief into opportunity, and their own children into both victims and unwitting accomplices. During the lunch break, Nathan approached me in the courthouse cafeteria, his usual swagger completely absent. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "Every failed business, every time they bailed me out, they were using stolen money. I was never the golden child. I was just another prop in their con game kept dependent, so I'd never question where the money came from. We were both tools." I agreed, surprising myself by feeling sympathy for the brother I'd resented for so long. They just used us differently. "That money they claimed you owed, they told me the same thing last year, said I owed them for all my failures. I actually believed I was a drain on their retirement." He laughed bitterly. "Retirement funded by dead relatives and crying children. What kind of parents do that?" The kind who saw their children not as people to love, but as assets to exploit, I thought but didn't say. Nathan was processing decades of manipulation in real time. The golden child discovering his pedestal was built on graves. When Nathan took the stand for cross-examination that afternoon, he looked like a man emerging from a decades-long fever dream. The prosecution had called him as their witness, expecting the favored son to support his parents' claims. Instead, they got something none of us anticipated: the truth. "Mr. Harrison," the prosecutor began confidently, "you're here to support your parents' claim that your sister owes the family money, correct?" Nathan gripped the witness stand edges, his knuckles white. I was, but that was before I knew the truth about everything. About the lies, the stolen money, about what they did to both of us. Harold Stern jumped up. "Your Honor, the witness is clearly under duress." "Sit down, Mr. Stern," Judge Morrison commanded. "The witness will answer the questions posed." The prosecutor, visibly flustered, tried to regain control. "Your sister built a successful company while you struggled. Surely you believe families should support each other." "You want to know what I believe?" Nathan's voice cracked with decades of suppressed emotion. "I believe my parents destroyed both their children, just in different ways. They convinced me I was special while ensuring I'd fail. They told me Mabel was stealing my opportunities while they stole from everyone, including us." "Mr. Harrison, please just answer." "I am answering," Nathan exploded. "You want to talk about family support?" "They supported me with money stolen from dead relatives. Every advantage I had was bought with someone else's inheritance. They made me complicit in their crimes without my knowledge, and now the FBI thinks I'm a money launderer because of the restaurant scheme they orchestrated." Jennifer rose smoothly. "Your Honor, I believe the witness has information relevant to the defense. May I cross-examine?" Permission granted, Jennifer approached Nathan with the same gentleness she'd use with a trauma victim. "Nathan, can you tell us about your parents' involvement in your restaurant business?" Nathan's composure shattered completely. "It was never my business. Oh, I thought it was played the successful restaurateur, but every decision went through them. They chose the investors, handled the books, structured the shell companies. When I questioned things, they'd remind me how I'd failed before, how I needed their guidance." "What kind of investors did they choose?" "The kind that break your legs if you miss payments." Nathan laughed bitterly. "They told me these were legitimate business people, but I started recognizing names from federal indictments. They were using my restaurants to launder money for criminal organizations, and they made sure my signature was on everything." He produced a flash drive from his pocket. "I've been recording them for 2 months, ever since I realized I was being set up. Every conversation about using Mabel's company to cover the fraud, every plan to let me take the fall. They were going to destroy both their children and walk away rich." The recordings Nathan played were devastating. Our parents discussed their children like chess pieces, planning moves years in advance. They'd kept Nathan dependent through learned helplessness while building resentment against me. They'd isolated me through neglect while using my success as a future piggy bank. Every family dynamic had been orchestrated for maximum exploitation. "The worst part," Nathan's voice broke, "is what they said about love. I recorded this last week." His phone played our mother's voice, cold and clinical. "Love is a tool, Nathan. We loved you when it kept you compliant. We withheld it from Mabel to make her desperate enough to succeed. Neither of you were ever children to us. You were investments, and frankly, you've both underperformed expectations." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even hardened court reporters looked shaken by the casual cruelty of a mother discussing her children like failed stock options. "There's more." Nathan continued pulling out documents. "These are the real books from my restaurants. 2 sets they didn't know I'd found. The official ones show losses justifying more investment. The real ones show massive profits, all diverted to accounts I don't control. They've been using my name to run a criminal enterprise while convincing me I was a failure who needed their help." Jennifer introduced the documents as evidence. "Nathan, why did you start investigating your parents?" "The bonds," he whispered. "Finding out Grandma Dorothy left me the same inheritance as Mabel, but they told me I got nothing. I realized if they'd lied about that, what else was false? So I started digging and everything unraveled. My whole life was a manipulation." "What did they tell you about Mabel growing up?" Nathan's eyes found mine across the courtroom. That she was selfish, that she hoarded resources meant for me. They said her good grades made me look bad on purpose, that she turned Grandma against me, that every opportunity she got was stolen from my future. They made me hate her for succeeding while ensuring I'd fail. And now I realize she succeeded despite them, not because of them. And I failed because of them, not despite them. They created a dynamic where we'd be too busy resenting each other to notice they were robbing everyone blind, including us. The cross-examination revealed years of psychological manipulation, so complex it took charts to explain. Our parents had created false rivalries, manufactured conflicts, and imaginary slights to keep us at odds. They'd told each of us lies about the other, fostering hatred that prevented alliance. Classic divide and conquer, executed on their own children. "One last question," Jennifer said gently. "What do you want the court to know?" Nathan straightened, finding strength in truth. "That Patricia and Robert Harrison aren't parents. They're predators who happen to have children. They don't deserve a penny from Mabel. If anything, they owe us both restitution for childhoods, lost relationships, destroyed, and lives derailed by their greed. I'm prepared to testify in every criminal trial, help every victim they've created, and make sure they never hurt anyone again." As Nathan left the stand, he stopped at my table. "I'm sorry, Mabel, for everything. I was their weapon against you, but I'm done being used. Whatever you need for the criminal trials, I'll be there." The reconciliation I'd never dared hope for came not through parental love, finally distributed fairly, but through mutual recognition of shared victimhood. We weren't the golden child and the scapegoat anymore. We were survivors of the same war, finally fighting on the same side. The prosecution rested their case in shambles. Their star witness had become their destruction, revealing crimes they'd never imagined. Harold Stern requested a recess to confer with his clients, but the damage was irreversible. Every witness they'd called had instead exposed another layer of fraud, another victim, another crime. That evening, the FBI arrested both my parents on federal racketeering charges. The restaurant money laundering alone would have been serious, but combined with interstate fraud, witness tampering, and the extensive estate thefts Diana had documented, they faced potential sentences that would see them die in prison. As I watched the news footage of my parents in handcuffs, I felt neither joy nor sorrow, just a hollow recognition that justice was finally catching up to people who'd spent their lives running from consequences. They'd stolen millions but lost everything that actually mattered: their freedom, their reputation, and any chance of redemption with the children they'd treated as commodities. Nathan and I met for coffee that night, 2 orphans by choice rather than circumstance. We had a lifetime of programmed antagonism to overcome, but for the first time we had a chance to know each other without our parents' poisonous influence. The golden child and the scapegoat were dead. In their place sat two adults ready to build something real from the ashes of our parents' lies. Dorothy Harrison's estate attorney, Margaret Whitfield, approached the witness stand carrying a manila envelope that had remained sealed for 5 years. She was in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me painfully of my grandmother. "Ms. Whitfield," Jennifer began, "you were Dorothy Harrison's attorney for how long?" 32 years. I handled her will, estate planning, and this special instruction. She held up the envelope with reverent care. "Can you explain this special instruction?" Margaret's voice carried the authority of someone fulfilling a sacred trust. Dorothy came to me 6 months before her death with specific concerns about her son and daughter-in-law. She documented troubling patterns of behavior toward her grandchildren and wanted to ensure certain information would come to light if needed. "What kind of information?" Evidence of child neglect, financial manipulation, and what she called the systematic destruction of Mabel's spirit while artificially inflating Nathan's ego. She insisted I create a sealed letter to be opened only if her family turned against each other in court. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "And we've reached that circumstance." "Unquestionably, Your Honor. Patricia and Robert Harrison suing their daughter while hiding stolen inheritance triggers the exact scenario Dorothy anticipated." Margaret broke the seal with ceremony, revealing not just a letter, but a thick packet of documents. Her voice wavered with emotion as she began reading Dorothy's words. "If you're hearing this, then my worst fears have come true. Patricia and Robert have finally pushed their greed to its legal conclusion. I pray Mabel is strong enough to hear what I must share, and that Nathan might finally understand the truth of his upbringing. I've watched my son and his wife destroy their children in different ways for decades. Mabel through neglect and cruelty, Nathan through false praise and enabled failure. Every time I tried to intervene, they threatened to cut off my access to the grandchildren entirely. So I documented everything instead, knowing this day would come. Enclosed are photographs, recordings, and written evidence of their treatment of both children. But first I must reveal something I've hidden out of misplaced hope for redemption. Patricia and Robert aren't just bad parents. They're criminals who've been stealing from family members since before their children were born. The courtroom stirred as Margaret produced cassette tapes, photographs, and handwritten notes spanning 20 years. The first photograph showed 5-year-old me at Dorothy's house, visibly malnourished, while a receipt showed my parents had just spent $8,000 on a swimming pool Nathan wanted. This recording is from Thanksgiving 1994. Margaret explained pressing play on an old cassette player. Dorothy's voice, younger but unmistakable, filled the courtroom. "Patricia, the child is skin and bones. When did she last see a doctor?" My mother's response was dismissive. "She's fine, just naturally thin. Nathan's the one who needs attention. His football coach says he could go pro with the right support. He's 7 years old and Mabel hasn't grown an inch in a year. I'm taking her to my doctor tomorrow." "You will not. How dare you question our parenting? We know what's best for our children." The argument escalated with my father joining to threaten cutting off Dorothy's visits if she interfered. Through it all, my grandmother's voice remained steady, documenting neglect while trying to protect me without losing access entirely. Margaret continued through evidence that painted a comprehensive picture of calculated abuse. Financial records showed Dorothy secretly paying for my school supplies, medical care, and even basic clothing, while my parents spent lavishly on Nathan. Photos documented injuries they'd dismissed as clumsiness. Report cards they'd hidden showed my excellence despite their indifference. Now, Margaret said I must read what Dorothy called the hardest truth. The letter continued, "I hired a private investigator in 2003 when I suspected Patricia and Robert were stealing from my brother Theodore's estate. What he discovered went beyond my worst expectations. They'd been stealing from family members for years, but more disturbing was their plan for their children. I have recordings of them discussing Mabel and Nathan like business investments. They kept Nathan dependent to have a malleable heir for their criminal enterprise. They neglected Mabel, hoping she'd either die or disappear, but when she showed resilience and intelligence, they pivoted to planning long-term exploitation of her success. The attached recording is from a conversation I secretly taped in 2005, shortly before my death. The static-filled recording began with my parents' voices in their bedroom, unaware Dorothy had planted a recorder during a visit. "Robert, the girl's getting too successful. If she keeps growing the business, she might hire real lawyers to discover what we've done. Patricia, relax. We've laid groundwork for years. Nathan believes she's his enemy. She's so desperate for approval she'd hand over everything for one kind word. And if that fails, we have the psychiatrist option. Robert, sometimes I think we should have just let her starve that winter. Patricia, no, this is better. Let her build something worth taking. Nathan's too stupid to create wealth, but he's perfect for inheriting it once we eliminate her claims." The casual discussion of letting their child starve shocked even the judge. But Dorothy's evidence continued relentlessly. Bank statements showing my parents living lavishly during the exact periods they'd claimed poverty to me. Photos of Nathan's multiple cars while I walked miles to work. Medical records they'd hidden, showing I'd been hospitalized 3 times for malnutrition-related issues. "There's a final section," Margaret said softly. Dorothy's last message to her grandchildren. "My dearest Mabel, you are reading this because you finally stood up to them. I'm so proud of you. Every summer you spent with me, I watched you grow stronger despite their cruelty. You turned their neglect into independence, their hatred into determination. The money I've left you is protected in ways they cannot touch, but more importantly, I've left you the truth. You were never unloved. You were so loved that I spent my final years gathering evidence to protect you from beyond the grave. Nathan, if you're hearing this, know that you were a victim too. They didn't love you more. They simply found you easier to control. The talents they praised were real, but they ensured you'd never develop them. Every failure wasn't your fault, but their design. It's not too late to break free and become the man you could have been. To the court, I state unequivocally, Mabel owes her parents nothing. They owe her a childhood of family and the inheritance they stole. The evidence in these files, combined with what I'm certain their greed has revealed during this trial, should be sufficient for both civil judgment and criminal prosecution. My body may be gone, but my testimony lives on through these words. I stayed silent in life to maintain access to my grandchildren, but in death I can finally speak the truth they tried so hard to hide. Margaret revealed the final element safety deposit boxes in 3 states containing more evidence. Dorothy established a trust for Mabel worth $2 million legally protected from any family claims. She created an identical trust for Nathan, though she suspected Patricia and Robert would try to steal it. The trustees are myself and 2 other attorneys who've been monitoring the situation for 5 years. Jennifer introduced bank documents confirming the trusts. So despite their claims of poverty and demands for support, both grandchildren are already millionaires through inheritance. The Harrisons couldn't touch. Correct. Dorothy was brilliant in her protections. She knew her son and daughter-in-law would steal anything accessible, so she created legal structures even they couldn't penetrate. The trusts become fully accessible to Mabel and Nathan on their 35th birthdays or upon the resolution of any legal action brought by their parents, whichever comes first. As the impact of Dorothy's posthumous testimony settled over the courtroom, I felt her presence like a warm embrace. She'd known I'd need proof validation and protection. Every document was her way of saying what she couldn't in life, that I was worthy of love, that the abuse wasn't my fault, and that someone had been fighting for me all along. Nathan wept openly in the gallery, holding pages that documented our grandmother's equal provision for both of us. The golden child narrative had been another lie. Dorothy had loved us both, but could only protect us through patience and planning that outlasted her life. One final thing, Margaret added, producing a small key. Dorothy left instructions that this key and a note be given to Mabel privately after the trial. She said Mabel would know what it opens and when the time is right to use it. My hand closed around the key, its weight both physical and symbolic. Even in death, my grandmother was still protecting me, still providing for needs she'd anticipated. The woman who'd taught me to bake cookies and trust in my own worth had orchestrated a legal demolition of my parents' lies that no living testimony could have matched. As court adjourned, I stood in the hallway clutching the key and the final note from Dorothy. Her handwriting, shaky with age but clear with purpose, delivered one last message. The key opens more than a lock, my dear one. It opens the door to the life they tried to steal from you. Use it when you're ready to stop surviving and start living. The final day of testimony dawned gray and fitting, as if the weather understood the gravity of what would unfold. Jennifer Blake stood before the court with the confidence of an attorney who'd systematically demolished every lie, exposed every crime, and revealed every betrayal my parents had crafted over decades. Your Honor. Jennifer began her closing argument. We've presented evidence of a conspiracy so comprehensive it defies normal family dysfunction. Patricia and Robert Harrison didn't simply fail as parents. They weaponized parenthood itself, turning their children into tools for fraud while stealing from every family member who trusted them. She walked the court through the evidence methodically. The forged contract allegedly signed on my 18th birthday, exposed by Nathan's confession of spending months perfecting my signature. The stolen inheritance from Dorothy Harrison, documented in meticulous detail by the grandmother who knew her evidence would be needed. The systematic theft from 7 deceased relatives revealed through forensic accounting that traced millions to offshore accounts. But the financial crimes, Jennifer continued pale beside the human cost. They starved one child while overfeeding another. They created a golden child and a scapegoat, not from favoritism, but as a calculated strategy to maintain control. They discussed letting their daughter die from neglect as casually as planning dinner. On the plaintiff's side, Harold Stern made a valiant effort at rehabilitation. Whatever family dynamics existed, the fact remains that parents are entitled to support from successful children. The contract's authenticity can be debated, but the moral obligation remains. His argument fell flat against the mountain of evidence. How could moral obligation exist when the parents had profited from raising the child they'd neglected? How could family values be invoked by people who'd stolen from grieving relatives at funerals? Judge Morrison interrupted Stern's increasingly desperate argument. Counselor, are you seriously suggesting that parents who stole their daughter's inheritance destroyed her credit before she was adult and conspired to have her declared mentally incompetent are entitled to financial support based on moral grounds? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Stern stammered through a response about forgiveness and moving forward, but his heart wasn't in it. Even he couldn't defend the indefensible. Jennifer's rebuttal was surgical. The plaintiffs came to this court seeking $300,000 they claim Mabel Harrison owes them. Through their greed, they've exposed crimes totaling over $18 million in stolen assets. They've revealed interstate fraud, racketeering money, laundering, and witness tampering. They've shown themselves to be criminals who happen to have children, not parents who deserve support. She displayed a chart showing the true financial picture. My parents' theft from estates, their hidden millions, their current wealth built on graves and betrayal. Beside it, she showed what they'd spent on each child, the disparity so stark it looked like evidence from 2 different families. Mabel Harrison owes her parents nothing, Jennifer declared. In fact, conservative calculation shows they owe her $1.4 million in stolen inheritance, plus damages for identity theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the conspiracy to destroy her business and freedom. The defense then called one last witness me. I took the stand not as the scared child who'd begged for scraps of approval, but as the woman who'd built success from their neglect. Jennifer's questions led me through the journey from hungry child to successful entrepreneur, emphasizing how every achievement came, despite my parents, not because of them. Mabel, what would you say to your parents' claim that family supports family? I looked at Patricia and Robert Harrison, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time, not as parents who'd failed, but as predators who'd hunted. Family does support family. That's why my grandmother Dorothy protected me with evidence from beyond the grave. That's why my chosen family of employees and friends rallied to expose their crimes. That's why even Nathan, despite decades of manipulation, finally chose truth over their lies. Real family doesn't steal, doesn't starve, doesn't plot destruction. What they offered was never family. It was a crime syndicate that happened to share DNA. Harold Stern's cross-examination tried to spark guilt, asking about holiday memories and family traditions. But every warm memory he invoked was from Dorothy's house, not theirs. Every tradition involved their absence, not presence. He was trying to conjure nostalgia from neglect, and it showed. No further questions, he finally conceded, apparently recognizing that every query only deepened his client's guilt. As I left the stand, I passed my parents' table. My mother reached out as if to touch me, her face crumbling with what might have been genuine emotion. But I saw the calculation behind her tears, the performance of maternal feeling when the audience was watching. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, still believing himself the victim of ungrateful children. Jennifer's final summary pulled no punches. This case began with a fraudulent claim for money, but revealed a lifetime of crime. The plaintiffs sought to steal their daughter's success after failing to steal her life through neglect. They created false evidence, suborned perjury, and attempted witness tampering even during trial proceedings. They've shown no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and no capacity for genuine parental love. She turned to address Judge Morrison directly. Your Honor, we ask not only for dismissal of their baseless claims, but for damages reflecting the true cost of their crimes, medical bills from childhood neglect, therapy costs from decades of emotional abuse, business losses from their attempts at corporate sabotage, and punitive damages sufficient to send a message that parents who prey on their children will face consequences. The courtroom fell silent as closing arguments ended. Judge Morrison announced she would render her verdict the following morning, though her expression throughout the trial suggested her decision was already made. The court officers led my parents away to holding cells, their bail revoked based on evidence of witness tampering presented during trial. That evening, Nathan and I met at Dorothy's house, now legally mine, but feeling like sacred ground we both needed to visit. We walked through rooms filled with memories of the only real parental love either of us had known. She saw it all, Nathan said, running his hands over the kitchen counter where she'd taught us both to cook separately because our parents wouldn't allow us to visit together. She documented everything because she knew someday we'd need proof we weren't crazy. She saved us. I agreed, even if it took this long to realize it. We found more evidence Dorothy had hidden throughout the house. Photos of us as children, our parents had discarded report cards, they'd thrown away awards they'd ignored. She'd preserved the childhood they'd tried to erase, keeping proof we'd existed as more than just tools for manipulation. In her study, we discovered journals dating back to our births. Every visit documented every concern recorded, every small victory celebrated in private when our parents wouldn't celebrate with us. The final entry, dated a week before her death, was addressed to both of us. My dear ones, if you're reading this together, then the miracle I prayed for has happened. You've found your way past their lies to each other. Know that every cruel thing they told you about each other was false. Mabel never stole Nathan's opportunities. Nathan never received the love denied to Mabel. You were both victims of the same evil, just tortured differently. Find in each other the family they never gave you. Their hatred ends with them. Let love begin with you.